Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business in life with a purpose, serving others, and achieving success. I'm your host today, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to learn how to do business in life to make an impact in the world. How are you going to serve today, and what impact will you make today? And my guest today, I guarantee if you listen to this, is going to make an impact because she's a rock star. Shelly, welcome to the show.
Steve, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We talked in the green room about single moms and business. How can a single mom be a servant to their business?
I think that if you first you have to start with the inside. Like it's you. It's you inside, right? You've got all the things that are going on as a single mom, you got all the things going on in a business. But if you don't, you hear this all the time, if you don't take care of you, no one else is going to take care of you, and then everything else falls apart. That's a real thing. But I think if you're when you're real honest with yourself in those moments and you figure out where your why is, what is it that's actually driving me to do this? Like, what do I want to do in my business? Who do I serve in my business? Right? I want to show my child this is what I do with my business that helps people, because that's another, transferable skill that you're teaching them, just like you're teaching them to wash their laundry or, manage their calendar, because now they all have phones, now to be
Yeah.
able to do all that themselves. And you can teach them all those things. But if you can show them that mom goes inside and figures out, okay, this is what my drive is, this is what my why is, and even when it's hard, I'm going to push through that, and this is what's going to happen. I'm going to show you that success. I'm going to come out on the other side. And that doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen. Got down points, you got low points, everybody has them. I mean, even when you're launching a business, like, you're going to have this roller coaster that's happening, right? The emotional roller coaster. You got to figure out what's going to pull you out of that, but you are going to have to be the one that does it, not anybody else.
Right. What's a single mom's listening, either has started a business or wants to start a business. Doesn't matter, network marketing or whatever. They want to start something and they're single and they have kids. What's a piece of advice you'd give them?
I think that you need to utilize the tribe that's around you. You probably know a lot of people that are successful. The biggest thing is asking for them to like, just ask them, right? We talked about this in the green room. If you don't ask about it, they're never going to offer it because that's not really on their radar. But what happens if somebody says to you, hey, Steve, I can give you this outline for a business plan that you can go back and try to figure out how to fit that into what you're trying to do with your business, right? You're not going to know all those tools, but if you have that network of people, that's what I stand by. My network is that's my currency, right? That's exactly who I go to. And before I launched my business, I called all of my coaching girlfriends and said, hey, tell me a little bit about what's happening post-COVID. Tell me what it looks like now. Tell me what, ask all the questions. I think you'll find that people will show up and help you.
And post COVID's even more so. This I call it a village or a tribe. How does a woman, a single mom, go out and find that tribe?
Well, there are lots of ways to do that now, but one of the things that you and I do frequently is that we are technically super connectors. Our whole entire mode of operation is to find people in our network to connect, because that's just something that really fills us up. If you're out there and you've got a friend that's like that, go talk to them and say, hey, who do you know that you can introduce me to? And then give them some specifics. I'm looking for, and I don't always ask for the business prospects. I don't think that's the right question. The right question is, who do you know in your network, a COI, a center of influence, somebody that does this? These are the type of people that they're talking to. Help me connect with those people. And then you just get out and start doing a little bit at a time, and build that network. And before you know it, you run into people like, I ran into you. Like,
Yeah.
we're not even in the same state, but now we have an opportunity to meet across the country and connect our networks to one another. I feel like that is just super, super powerful.
Partnerships. That's what I call it, and it's the same thing. And Dr. Ivan Meisner, who I had on yesterday, had a great word: clusters. Have different clusters, and following up with them and follow through. You know, it's interesting. You asked this question. What is your birth name? What is your birth name?
Oh, so we're going down this other path over
We're
here.
gonna go to a different path now, girl.
All right. All right. So my actual birth name is Carrie Underwood.
Get out of here.
I'm not kidding.
With a C, like she spells it?
It's actually Carri, so she spells it with an E. But our middle initials are M, same, and then Underwood is the last name. I have a few years ahead of her, so I would be the OG, but she takes the name for everybody knowing it. But it's a fun icebreaker game whenever I'm at some kind of a party or something, and they're like, hey, write down something about you, and then you've got to go find that person in the room. No one ever finds it. No one
I
ever.
see. I see why you want me to ask that question. And, I've talked to you a couple times, never known. And that's interesting, but it's interesting how what I love what you're doing is separating yourself from that because you are an individual doing
Yeah.
something different than that Carrie Underwood. So there's no confusion and mistake in there, because you do kind of look like
Well,
her.
over the time period, that's very sweet. Over the years, I went by a nickname by Shelly because Michelle was my middle name. So I've been called Shelly since I was, in like young school, and then ended up getting, married. So changed my maiden name. So that's where Shelly Starks ends up coming from. But because it's such a departure from Carrie Underwood, nobody ever makes the connection.
Yeah. And that brings up a great question about labels and titles people have. What's your thoughts on those?
I think that, I mean, people can do whatever they feel most comfortable with, but
Yeah.
I believe in being authentically who you are. So if you are, I'm coming into a season in my life where it's becoming more and more prevalent that this is how I want to be. I don't want to have the perfect appearance online of all the things that I think everybody wants to see and have that title or have that, I don't feel like that's me. Right? There's so many facets that are me. That's
Yeah.
not just that, whatever you're trying to label yourself as. If you're putting yourself in that box, imagine how hard it is for other people to take you out of that box.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so well said. And that leads to communication coaching because that's what communicating, your label is Steve Ramona. That's Steve Shelly Starks. That's what people know us as. But that's part of communication, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, if you're out and about in a lot of different ways. Maybe you're in an office or if you're remote or whatever, I think that everybody would say there's a lot going on with this post-COVID
Yeah.
situation where you're not feeling necessarily connected. So the only way that we're going to really feel connected is to learn to communicate better.
Yeah.
If we are communicating at the level of the person that we're talking to, or if we're communicating in their behavioral style, meaning they feel more comfortable because you're trying to adapt to their style, defensive gates go down, that
Yeah.
conversation gets wider, and there's more availability for understanding. And it doesn't turn into more of an emotional communication. It turns into, something that goes more to the frontal lobe than it does to the back of your brain. So if you're trying to be out there and just kind of communicate in your style only, you're only going to be wrong about 60% of the time.
Yeah. That's a great numbers. I like
Not
those
a, not a
odds.
good, not a good statistic.
No, it's not. Let's talk about communication coaching and the future for impact with businesses and their teams. What do you see that look like?
Well, again, I really believe that the disconnect that we have right now, first of all, it can be generational, right? It always
Mhm.
has been this way, but I think it's even more of a gap now because you've got younger people who have always been, digital babies. They've always had all of the technology and they're really great at programs and all of the things that they need to do for their actual job. And then you have a little bit older demographic that's like, no, I'm not going to do a Zoom meeting. Or I'm not going to do, a phone call. We're going to do an in-person meeting. Well, the world is changing. And if you're going to adapt to that world, you have to figure out how you're going to make the other person feel comfortable in a conversation, right? So you got to know your demographic, either that you're talking to or you're going to be talking to. If you got a younger person and you're a little bit older, hey, you might want to text them. You know, hey, you might want to say, let's jump on a Zoom call or a Teams call. Let's, kind of see each other face to face. But I believe that businesses are going to have to make their employees feel connected some way. And I am just hands down all about the fact that if I can help that business owner learn to communicate in the style of the behavioral style of the employee that they have, that employee is going to feel something. Well, guess what? They don't leave as often if they feel connected, if they feel part of a community, if they feel like the culture is something they want to be a part of. But if you're trying to isolate because they aren't like you,
Yeah.
it's going to turn into, a constant turnover for your business.
I love that. And it brings to mind of people will ask me, hey, Steve, what's the best way to connect with you or communicate with you? And that's what you're saying is it's a 30-year-old says, hey, I love text. Can you just send me text and just follow through? This is I'm gonna put you on the spot here, but I know you're
Okay.
a strong woman. Where do you see communication as a tool for businesses? Where the top, the middle? How important is it for a business to have great communication?
I think it's important at every single level. You've got the leadership. In fact, I won't even, work with an organization that the leadership is not involved. If you say, hey, Shelly, I want you to fix my people, we're not the right fit, because I want to make sure that you understand this is how what they're being taught and how they're learning to change their communication as well to frame it around different behavioral styles. But if the leadership is not doing that, it's not going to be reinforced when I'm not there. Number one. Number two, they need to set the precedent as a leader in the organization. But I had something that's brought to mind. Every year that I was in a corporate setting in any company, I always thought there's a handful of people that I need to make sure that I befriend in this massive building. Do you know who they were?
The janitor? I don't know.
The janitor, because they can always get you in places with their keys if you get locked out or something happens. The head secretary, because she literally runs the entire building, not the guy who has the, VP title on his name. Also the mailroom people, because those people also know when things are coming and going at all points. And if you've got deadlines, they're going to be involved in all of that. It was always the people who were the workers on the ground that really made the building stand up, not the people that you thought you needed to impress, which were those titles, those bigger title names. And it's so funny because anytime somebody needed something, they'd come to me because they're like, Shelly, you know everybody. You know them by name, and you walk down and say hi to them. I'd take them coffee if I was going by. It's just, to me, it's a matter of making people feel important, making them feel heard, making them feel like you actually see them, and that is not at any one level of an organization. It has to be throughout the entire organization.
Audience, I'm going to tell you a tip. If you hear somebody describe somebody as everybody, that's a servant's heart. And that's what Shelly just did. She didn't do that. She did it off the cuff. Because seriously, I know I hear it all the time too. You know everybody. A connector, you use the word connector or whatever you want to use.
Yeah.
How does somebody jump into, I want to connect? We talked about it a little bit before, but like anybody, not just single moms, but anybody, young, old, how important is, I say your network is your net worth. You were kind of saying that before, the level of not just how many people, but what kind of people you have. How does somebody say, hey, I want to build this network? What advice you have for them?
Well, anytime that somebody is new to networking and they ask me, they're like, Shelly, how did you build this, or this is an every single day thing that you do, right? And when I get on a call one-to-one with somebody, I do 25 to 30 one-to-ones a week still. When I get on a call with someone, my entire intention is to find out what they do, who in my network I can connect them with. It is not for me to get something off of that call. It is, it happens, but that's not the goal. The goal is for me to help them connect with someone that is going to help them either, build a better network or a bigger network, or is going to bring them business. It's not always about business, but it could lead to that. And then what I always tell people is, there's a couple of key questions that you can ask during your, one-to-ones, not just, who do you look to connect with? Like, yeah, that's great. Who is it that you want to connect with? But ask them to give you some examples of, those connections. So if someone says, I look to connect with commercial bankers, tell me why. How does that connect you to your business? Or how does it connect with, referrals for you in that business? Because giving somebody an example or giving them, some kind of story around that helps them to think outside the box of just the words that they just said to you. They just literally said a commercial banker. Okay, well, I probably know 10 commercial bankers, but I might want to connect you with somebody because I've heard they have a specialty in something, or they're really, this is where their heart is. Maybe they do a lot in nonprofits. So that could connect you. That's going to make me think, oh yeah, that's exactly it. The next thing that I tell people to do, ask them what networking groups they've been a part of and if you can visit as a guest.
Great advice.
So when you are, out there, having somebody bring you into a networking group and then introducing you is a way easier thing than just showing up and being like, hey, I know no one, I'm here. And regardless of your behavioral style, that's just that's a softer landing to go into a networking group. And then you just keep doing this over and over and over again until you find your tribe.
Yeah.
You find those people that tend to light you up when you have a conversation with them. And then I usually ask people, hey, if I make a connection for you and there's something that comes from that, shoot me a note, because that like fuels me for the next thing. It's like, oh my gosh, that's awesome that was such a good connection for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. The funny thing, everything you just said falls right back to communications.
It does.
How are you communicating? And I so appreciate you saying that. With communication, though, we have to have, I call the scoreboard, or people call the goal. What is a big goal for you in your next 5 years?
Well, currently I have 7 revenue streams and they're not all like working at the same pace. My goal is to get, most of those revenue streams on passive income, so that they actually are handling I can still work them, but the passive income is just coming in. And so it's not like you're hunting and killing every single thing that
Yeah.
you're not just out there to eat, get something to eat. It's like literally creating a buildable, stackable, or diversified wealth channel. And my goal is to, I've had multiple businesses in the past and I only had one revenue stream. And then when things get tough or you have a pandemic, nobody could have known that was going to happen. Then it changes the terrain for what your future looks like. And my goal is to really get myself into a place where that passive income is steady. And then I can go and work in this communication coaching world and do it from, not have to worry about any of the income or the bills or whatever is happening there. But the other big goal that I have is to do a TED Talk. That's one of my big goals that I have wanted to do for many, many years. So in 5 years, I could say that's definitely going to happen.
I love what you're saying. And a TED Talk is so powerful because that's what I've been doing. And as I've told you, it's changed my life. So you're right. And a tip for the audience that I'm going to add to it: if your business is struggling, you're not bringing in money, go partner up with somebody else like Shelly has, and I'm doing, or does, and I do. That's what I do. I campaign, and go campaign for them. Go reach out to your network. Go, hey, I've got XYZ. I think you'd be interested. And imagine you wake up and you got a Venmo coming to you for $300 or a Zelle for $1,500. And that funds you for a month that you're having a tough time. And then, like you said, you've got this passive income coming. You never have to worry, especially if you have family and you got bills and those type of things. Um, Somebody's working 8 to 5. We talked about this in the green room, gave you that example, but want to start their business. What's advice would you give them?
Yeah, we did talk about this. I think that the biggest thing is find you a couple of mentors who you look up to, that you think that they're successful, And by the way, there's no one path to being successful. There are so many different ways to get there. And if you silo yourself in thinking you have to come up with it or you have to create it from nothing, you're missing out on all of the opportunity that's out there that could be part of your journey, but you just don't know about it, right? And so if you talk to those mentors and they can give you, maybe they give you a business plan that, just as an example, here's a business plan that you can work towards, as you're working in your current 8 to 5 job. You can start doing these things here at once a week or twice a week. So you're moving yourself towards that. I will say though, Steve, at some point, like there is a point where you have to do the leap, and the scary leap, right? Where you're like, all right, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna do this full time. And you can get yourself set up so that you're not like putting yourself in a financial strain for that, but there's still a mental process that happens there. But one tip that I would say that I could give somebody is, every time that you think that you're super secure in an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5 job, think about the last set of layoffs that happened at a company that you heard of. So don't just pretend just because you've got the job and that it's secure. I'm not saying worry that you're going to lose your job, but just know that it's not near. We've created this false sense of security with that, right? So when you do get to the point and you've got the courage and you're excited and you've got something you're passionate about and you want to help people, make that leap because you're betting on you.
Yeah.
The business that you work for only has loyalty to so much of the extent, like their loyalties lie with them as a business. And sometimes we are the casualties of that, that loyalty, where that lies. So just remember that, like, if you're you're straddling the fence, you're like, when should I jump? It's always going to seem a little scary to go, but bet on you. If you're ready and you've got everything, where it needs to be, and even if you don't have it everywhere where you think it needs to be, figure out how you can get out there and at least try it for a couple of months. What's the worst that can happen?
Go find another job. And
Go
I
get another
always,
job.
yeah, I know it make it sound simple, and there's always a mindset, but that's really, and decision. Indecision is the worst decision you can make, and we've talked about in our previous meeting. And you're talking about being uncomfortable to be comfortable. That's what business is all about. Me and you have gone through it,
Yeah.
and it's just crazy. We're running out of time here, but you showed us such a servant heart. But on top of that, you're successful in business, and you're getting more successful because of your servant heart. So let me ask this. Tell me a story of how you used your servant heart in your business to help somebody, and what was the outcome?
So I had a nonprofit that I was basically volunteering. I wasn't quite on
Mhm.
the actual committee yet, but I was volunteering, and I noticed that it was for young adults. So I guess they were older teenagers, right at that 18, 19-year-old, time period, pretty impressionable time period. And I noticed that, they were teaching them all these life skills, how to balance a checkbook, or how to balance your, checking account, how to, write emails, how to put a resume together. These are the types of attire that you need to wear for an interview. Like, a lot of these kids were basically in foster care, so they didn't have the families that they had, that
Mm.
maybe other people have been around and have the infrastructure to teach them that stuff. So, but what I realized when I was doing this volunteering is that I could come in and help them understand how to communicate, identifying different styles so they could actually, have a different conversation, even if they were a little more introspective and didn't want to have that conversation. For the moment, could you extend yourself and have that conversation in an interview so that you could actually show them the best version of you? And I started doing that with this nonprofit, and it ended up turning into one of the other, people that were volunteering was like, Shelly, I just can't even believe the difference you've made with this group of young, men and women. I want to introduce you to my company for you to come in. We need this, right? This is something we need. I didn't have any intention at all of getting business from any of that. This was just, how can I help these young people have the best foot forward, in a world where they've been kind of dealt a short hand. Now we need to show them, how do we get you to the place where you can, be a rock star? it doesn't matter how you grew up. You hear stories all the time about people who grew up in, very poor areas, and they've risen from the ashes and created an empire,
Yeah.
so it's all about a mindset. And then, if you can offer that to other people in need, and it didn't cost me anything except time.
And the great thing about this audience, I want you to recap and listen to. She used a servant heart to help somebody, and she built a business around that and helped make money with that. Serving doesn't come with a scoreboard, how, why, or when. You just do it daily as much as you can, like Shelly, and you'll be a rock star like Shelly is.
Thank you,
And
Steve.
you could join the group of rock stars. I want to thank you for being on. This is what our podcast is all about, learning how to share servant attitude. And
Thank
you've done
you.
that so well.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm just so excited to, continue our networking relationships and introducing each other into our networks. And that's the name of the game here, right? Like,
Yep.
good people connecting with good people.
Well, speaking of connecting, how can people connect with you? How about that segue? That was pretty
That's
good, Steve.
great. That's great. So you can reach me on my website, shellystarks.com. I am on all of the social media platforms under Shelly Starks as well. The name of my company is Inline Consulting Services, so you can Google that. And I've got a calendar link. If anybody wants to hop on my calendar, do a one-to-one, I'm happy to hop on and, help them individually with that networking, learning how to network or learning how they can, kind of start this whole networking thing that Steve and I have talked about this whole show. So happy to do that.
Thank you again. And audience, listen to this a couple times. I say at the end of every one of my shows, but there were so many $1 million nuggets she gave us that you want to listen. Make sure you got it, especially if you're thinking about starting a business or you're a single mom or an 8-to-5er that wants to do something on the side. This is a great way to get started. And we'll see all of you at the next great episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.